Hi all, I have another fascinating Leela chess game to show you against Arasan chess engine in the Chess.com Computer Championship Rapid Rumble, 15 minutes with a 5-second increment, stage 1. Let's have a look. So this is Leela ID 11089. So d4 from Leela, d5 we see c4 e6, knight f3, now slightly unusual a6, but it has been played before. More usual is knight f6. As you might imagine, it looks pretty classical. And now maybe c6, and this position might thought to have a small edge. But you can see that black has a solid center control, supported by both c6 and e6 here. It's a solid position. There is an issue there, but that's the way classically it's played. So a6, and now Leela actually questions basically the d5 pawn here. She takes on d5 and puts immediate pressure with knight c3. And now, actually, knight c6, this looks a little bit quirky already to play knight c6. Maybe, I'm not entirely sure, but it looks to be slightly on the improvised side. Playing c6 here might be an idea. It doesn't seem to be that bad. But knight c6 looks a little bit artificial, and Leela is a kind of punisher of artificial moves. The knight's blocking in the c pawn, which could have been used for support of d5. We see queen b3 now, putting more pressure on d5. Now here it's interesting, black can actually tactically in this position support d5 with knight f6 as well as what was played, which was bishop b4. Let's have a quick look at knight f6, because there's a very interesting idea here with bishop d6. This is a very interesting way to defend. For example, knight takes, just bishop e6. This is pretty nasty. So if takes, then we can take here, protecting c6, for example. If here, then the idea basically is black seems to be okay. For example, queen takes here, and black would have sufficient compensation in this position. For example, like this, and that will be around equal. So it's a very, very interesting defensive try here to play knight f6, bishop g5, and then bishop d6. On bishop e7, then just taking and queen takes is just winning white a pawn. Basically, it's a massive position, because if takes, then it's c7's an issue. There's no time for black, and if the here rook d1 gives white time to protect the center. So this was an interesting try. I thought behind the scenes. But the other tactical way is just pinning the knight. But now bishop g5, and again there's a very, very tactical idea which was available to black here, which black bypassed, which was black played knight ge7, but there is actually a tactical knight takes d4 here. So for example, knight takes d4, we can take on c3 and take on g5. This position, white only has a small edge, it seems. Technically, that's an interesting continuation. And also, here, if queen takes b4, knight c2 check, this position should be around about even. This position looks dynamically about equal. So anyway, the tension is kind of kept with this move, which I believe is in Leela's favour to keep a lot richness to the position. So that kind of favours, I think, Leela's style of play, the tree search of Leela. So we have f6 here, bishop f4, and now bishop g4 is played. And so the f6 is a bit of a compromise, clearly. But it's the continuation which is really a major concern from this position as well. Black's continuation, which looks entirely like it's out of book theory. It looks a strange thing to do. If black had just simply castled here, by the way, this already looks just a comfortable position to play in. Maybe dropping back the queen later. It looks very comfortable. But this continuation now, Leela grabs the dark square bishop here, So that's given up, because I guess this position maybe is okay though as well to play. I mean, in a sense, while it's only got a small edge there, this is quite committal to take on c3, giving up one bishop. And now this is really committal, g5, and then h5. So black's really playing in a committal manner. And yes, it's threatening to trap the bishop. So we have h3 at least giving the bishop h2, and then black inflicts structural damage. But is it really the case that Arasan doesn't see the downsides of this, the bishop pair? White bishop pair versus the knight pair. The space is interesting, but there's also a very, very tactical idea. Okay, that bishop is preserved. Queen d7, as though looking to hit h3 at some point. Here, if you consider knight h4, I mean, you might be asking about knight h4 here. Let's have a look. This interruption of the king can just go here, and actually this is a wonderful position for white if you look at this, because there's nowhere black can easily castle here. If black castles queenside, then bang, bishop takes a6, and c6 is an issue, and it doesn't bear thinking about really to castle the other side. If here, then this is just unpleasant, losing c7. So if castling, then this is really unpleasant. Things are falling to bits, basically. So this is very precarious looking a little bit here already. So queen d7, not venturing to move the knight. Bishop e2, knight goes back. And it looks as though this actually is threatening to cheekily take on h3, which might have a strategic implication of a past h-pawn. And Leela actually reacts to this in a very interesting manner. If casting queenside, then nabbing the pawn and dropping back to d7 might be best with tempo. For example here, and maybe this is something for black to play with here, this past h-pawn. But Leela actually plays h4, causing real fractures in black's pawn structure, trying to reduce the one island into two, to divide the island of pawns now. It's really fragmented pawn chain here. And this is a long-term issue, this is a long-term downside. Because these, first of all, they don't really control the g-file, they're not blocking the g-file. Second of all, frontal attacks are more effective because there's no real immediate support being able to be given to the h4 pawn. So they're lacking natural support properties now by being fragmented. I mean, I believe this is the whole point of things like the minority attack, which you might have heard of. It's to fragment pawns. Once pawns are fragmented, frontal attacks are more effective. Less natural support within the pawn chain for the pawns to help each other out, to watch each other's back. But here, yeah, h4 at some point is going to be weak here to frontal attacks, and white can actually time that very well potentially. So here we see bishop f1, knight g6, and Leela castles queenside, black castles queenside, b4. So this looks scary, this b5. We actually see f5 just permitting it, actually. So possibly the knight would just go back to b8, and Leela actually pushed for a4 instead of b5. We have queen e7, quite tactical, using the b4 weakness. Say king b8 instead, then b5, and you can see this bishop and the queen is conspiring on c7. So this looks nasty already, but maybe even b takes is stronger than any b6. For example here, bang, mate. So this is pretty strong. The queen can't leave c7 in a hurry here. And if b takes, then queen a5, looking at a6 and c7, this looks absolutely crushing. So basically, let's see. So queen e7, b5, queen b4. If knight b4, then actually king d2 is an interesting nifty move, with ideas like rook b1, rook c1. So here, for example, taking, I know that this looks terrible with the treble pawns, but actually look at this position. This continuation white can actually try and win a piece. There's no, as long as there's no lethal discovered attack here, this is a good line. White can actually survive this. And now threatening things like queen takes b6 check, because that pawn's still pinned. So that's an interesting line with knight b4. But queen b4 was played. And Leela doesn't actually mind the exchange of queens. This bishop pair, now after king d2, is really quite dangerous. And we've got the g-file, the fragmented pawns. It's not just this pawn, but this pawn could be a major target pretty soon. So a5. We have bishop h3. That's protected. If it was protected with rook hf8, then this scenario gets to be a real torture rack for black. Look at c7 now. So the bishops are really torturing the black position. It's like the knights haven't got that many squares, and in fact white can put the pressure on. It's cracking here. Pawns might be dropping off soon, etc. So let's say this weird continuation. It's just horrible. It just doesn't bear thinking about. So knight e7. But this situation is it's starting to be equally feel unpleasant. White's bishops are really putting real pressure on black. The rooks have the g-file, and they dominate the g-file here with authority. We have those switching to the queen side as well. b6, installing the form pawn installed on the queen side. It does mean a slight dislocation. Rook c5 to pick up a5 now. So, and also support, of course, for bishop c7. But knight a5 prevents rook c5. It seems that's the main idea, really. If we look at, say, this, inviting rook c5, this doesn't really help black, even though the rook might be seemingly awkward. I believe this is not a good idea, because there's always things like rook takes a6 and b7. Black's got to be extremely careful there. I think it's not worth the price of trying to trap that rook. So we have knight a6, bishop f1, and now there is an immediate danger of taking in b7 queening. So the king steps back to stop that mechanism. Just to put that on the board, bishop takes b7. The bishop's controlling c7, so there's no real way of stopping the queen there. So we have king c8, bishop d6, rook h8. On rook hg7, bishop takes. This position, yeah, black's shedding load of pawns. And also now there's b7, b8 threatens. So this continuation, yeah, black's really shedding a lot of pawns to reach a totally lost rook and pawn ending. So we have rook h8. But even so here, this is horrible. Bishop takes, rook takes f5. It's still really horrible. So although white's cashed out the bishop pair, winning f5 here is very nice. This position is very nice. The bishop can try and at least dominate this knight in many variations now. So let's count the pawns. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and technically 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. But they're so weak to frontal attacks. King b8. We have f4. If trying to be a nuisance, it doesn't really do anything. If you look, the knight's not really got too many prospects. So the knight didn't bother for a moment. So king b8, f4. And we have rook g5, so that's nice, supporting the g5 square. King e2, and then this is a really interesting maneuver. The king actually can be used for the frontal attack of all pieces. You can imagine king f3, g2 taking h4, and then h5 drops. These are just like apple picking. Leela's gone on a strawberry picking exercise, just to pick the strawberries which have popped up. It's just so weak. There's just no fellow support here. So king f3, yeah, the king's just going to pick off h4 from the tree, and it's given up voluntarily in desperation. If here, king h3, it doesn't really make any difference. It just straightens out white's pawn structure here, giving a big g-pawn past pawn. So we have h3. So here, taking a pawn. So 3, 4, 5, 6, 3, 4, 5. First pawn up. And now threatening to be 2 pawns up, taking there. Bishop e2. Bishop d3. The knight's really being controlled here, because now if knight before bishop b1, for example. So there, the knight's really controlled. It's not being a nuisance. Another pawn taking 2 pawns up. The pawns are just falling to pieces, yeah. Or just falling off the tree, rather. And pushing the pawns over here to support b6. So no need even for a rook to be involved supporting b6. We have check. This is just a really dominating winning position. Authority on the g file. Again, the bishop's really controlling any actions of the knight here from d3. It's very complementary to the pawn chain. And it snaps off the pesky knight here. And now we have rook takes. Okay, so still at the moment, well, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's 3 pawns up here. And yeah, this is just absolutely a winning position. And there are actually a lot of quick ways for white to have won this. White could have just taken on d5 here. There's multiple roads to just simplifying and winning. And Leela started to put on her troll hat pretty soon. We're about to see, by the way, dragging this out. But a win is a win to the neural network. Yeah, here, rook d6, you might think is fascinating. Basically, yeah, okay, let's just carry on. White played now rook a4 supporting that pawn. We have c5. So this is black's idea to try and do something. And now this threatens mate. So that's parried. Now rook d2 is played. There was an easy simplification, but this is not what Leela's trying to do to find optimal wins. For example, this line, white could just easily win this in short order like that. But here we do see Leela the troll face coming out. just trolling, just torturing black. Yeah. Because here the threat is actually rook a8 checkmate. So by controlling the escape squares here, it's threatening checkmate. So then it's threatening again to double rooks at the wrong time for black. All right, threatening checkmate again with rook a8. Holding the pawn. Threatening checkmate with rook a8 now. Threatening checkmate. I know this is looking a bit weird. Now black takes here, threatening checkmate. Threatening checkmate with rook a8. And it carries on. Actually, I'm going to fast forward a bit here because this is a bit silly business. Silly. Let's get to an interesting event from here. It's just clearly winning for white. This is also threatening mass simplification with rook d8 rather. Now the pawns are starting to be pushed. So yeah, we've got 2 connected pass pawns over here. But it's also the rules of the tournament as well don't help the Leela's troll. Leela is encouraged to troll because in TSEC it would have been if both sides thought it was a gigantic advantage, it would just be adjudicated as a win. So this might be a slight downside of that play to the death, but on the other hand, sometimes seeing the play to death can be entertaining. So it swings and roundabouts. So anyway, black starts cracking even more. Here, roundabout here, king e6. Black just leaves that rook to be taken with rook d7. Just had enough. Just finish it. Just finish the game. But if rook f8, actually f7, and then rook b8 anyway. So black just wants the game to be finished, I think, as well, and gives up both rooks and then checkmate. Okay. So anyway, some instructive points from this game. I think I felt as though black's opening play was a bad improvisation. Black ended up giving up the bishop pair quite quickly, having a pawn chain which was liable to be undermined, and it was fragmented. And once the pawn chain, fragmented pawns means, they lack natural support from fellow pawns. And so, in endgames, it's not just rooks, as this game showed, but also frontal attacks from the king, which can expose, the fragmented pawns. And play on both sides, I thought, was neat in this game as well. I hope you got some stuff out of this. Okay, comments, questions, likes, shares appreciated. Thanks so much.